check it out. Let's give out some free DVDs. We want the police to check out this movie, so it's important. And let's see if they want to get one. Oh yeah.
Good
cool.
news, Toronto.
What are you guys doing? Hi, how are you? Pretty good. How you doing? Well, yeah, I produced the first movie in Toronto. It's called Toronto G20 Exposed. Okay. So we're just giving this out to police for free. And
You gave one out that day, did you not?
I'm not sure. I'm giving it out to a lot of police officers because I want them to be aware of kind of what happened. And I don't hold them accountable, you know. It's a G20 issue, but I think it's they like the artwork because it's kind of a cool DVD.
Artwork's pretty cool.
Yeah, isn't it look awesome?
Yeah.
The back of the DVD cover. You ever heard of Scared Cop Lady?
I've heard, yes.
Yeah. And then we got Officer Bubbles, you know, infamous, and then the Eat Center guy. It's been taken well by police because they want to see what actually happened. You know, they're in post during G20, so they didn't get to kind of move around and see what was happening throughout the city. But yeah, I wanted to give you one. It's okay. Yeah, they put us in the Toronto Sun. Joe Warmington, a great reporter, did a feature story on the website, G20 Exposed, Toronto G20 Exposed.ca. You can go online and check it out for free. Because you know what? I want good officers to be good officers. And I want to hold people accountable. That's all.
Good for you.
So I got freedom of speech in this country, sir.
That's excellent. You know
That's
what?
right.
That's what we value in this country.
That's right. That's what I value. I'm a real
love about
Canadian.
this country.
I stand up for my country.
That's great.
And when I see people attacking amputees, I stand up for that. And it was wrong what some people did.
Right.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
It's not about me, it's about the people that were involved, the people that had the cameras during the G20. It's about the people that actually had to go through some tough times, you know? And it's about independent media like Press for Truth and the Real News and InfoWars. We took their footage and we made that movie what it is. People have sacrificed themselves to make this country what it is. And these Canadian Charter rights and freedoms were made because people sacrificed. So when they're taken away, that paper is only as good as the government says it is. So when it's taken away, we got to stand up and say, hey, listen, I want people to see this movie. I'm passionate about it. I want them to see the truth. I want them to see chronologically what happened during the events of G20. If you see this movie, it's gonna feel like you were at G20. So it's about getting the truth out, and that's more important, you know? So we got it into the Ontario Parliament. He's got the DVD in his hand right there.
Oh yeah.
There he goes, looking at it.
But I do encourage people to go to the website Toronto G2 Exposed.ca. Toronto G2. Toronto G20 Exposed. Toronto G20 Exposed.ca. It's an age thing, Speaker. I hope folks will bear with me. Yeah, Toronto G20 Exposed.ca. There is a movie starring, amongst others, Officer Bubbles. I suspect people will find it most interesting.
The gentleman, his name is Peter
Cormos?
Cormos, that's right.
Look out for MPP Peter Cormos representing Welland.
He's in the movie himself, Peter Cormos, NDP all the way. There it is. Went to Parliament. I can't believe that this movie went to Queen's Park and they give us a plug. That was awesome, really. So I want to document this stuff. This is out of hand. Of course I can show it, dude, but I refuse to.
Word up, Toronto Truth Seekers, we're out here. It is the week of the G20 Seoul, Korea, so that's why I prepared some information here. What we have here is a rundown of what went down in Toronto during the G20 that took place at the end of June 2010. So right here, we start off with, in the middle, I put the final proof of the G20 police farce. That's basically our headline here because of what happened. Basically, in this corner, we've got the police officers with removed badge numbers. No name tags, no badges. You can see the details here, how it was done. We've now found out over 70 officers from Toronto did this. That's admitted, as well as multiple from around the country. We don't even know how many. This guy has a lot to explain for. This is the Chief of Police, Bill Blair, who admits that he requested the 5-meter rule, or the secret law that was passed, the Public Works Act. Right here we've got a picture of the week after the G20 when the citizens, the good people of Toronto, the protesters, took back the intersection of Queen and Spadina where the infamous kettle drill took place. The kettle drill was what Sherry Good was stuck in. Sherry Good is the woman who has launched this class action lawsuit. It's in her name.
It was a very frightening and disturbing experience. I couldn't believe this was happening in my country. Despite what I went through, I still consider myself lucky compared to the people who were taken and held at the Eastern Detention Center. I couldn't sleep that night. I had to take off work the next day, and I suffered from a panic attack on the way to work the following day. But the biggest consequence of that weekend is that I have lost my trust in the police. Now I am nervous when I see a police car. I consistently look over my shoulder. Sadly, it will take a long time to regain that trust.
Finally, I think it's fair to say that the images that many Canadians witnessed on that weekend are images that people generally would not want to see again. And one of the goals of a class action is to see if ultimately the plaintiff is successful, if there are ways of ensuring that situations like that don't occur again in the future. That will be one of the other key objectives of this particular claim.
It is a $45 million lawsuit against Toronto police, one of the major lawsuits that's occurred because of the G20. Another major lawsuit right here. Officer Bubbles sues YouTube. Understand? Multiple YouTube users, YouTube commenters, and people that made these Officer Bubbles cartoons here are in trouble under a $1.2 million lawsuit looking to get these videos off YouTube. The videos were removed from YouTube from the original user and then were re-uploaded. They've been seen by more people than ever. Another guy that's got to do a lot of explaining right here, Dalton McGuinty, Premier of Toronto, created the so-called 5-meter rule, this secret law that was passed. As you can see, the absolutely massive security. We're doing spot checks on basically everyone that was downtown for that weekend. So it was a sign of things to come. The martial law that's going to be, well, who knows when it's going to be declared. But on the back here, we've got a bit more info. One of the major photo ops, major like Hollywood psychological operations in front of the Toronto Film Studios was a major takedown of activist Lacey McCauley from the U.S. Who I actually interviewed. We played the interview on Word of Mouth Wednesday. Another person I interviewed, Elroy Yao, TTC worker, arrested somewhere near Queen's Park, walking to work at Queen's Park Station, was arrested in full TTC uniform.
There was about 30, 35 people in my cell, a few which I still keep in touch with, actually. Another interesting point is that one of the cops was threatening me, saying that my weapon, that I am armed for G20, and I was going to cause harm because I had a metal weapon with me, which was my transfer punch. So the best answer to tell him was, you know what, with this, the best I could do is give you a free ride.
Mm-hmm. Almost as ridiculous as foam weaponry being confiscated. Medieval role-playing game, contested person that plays these kind of games was at Union Station and had his foam weapons taken. And these were included in the big cache of weapons display.
Actually, some of the things that are on display are actually seem quite harmless. From on the surface, they were swimming goggles or safety goggles or bike helmets, paintball helmets. There was some hockey gear, sports gear, also spray paint. There was also some bear repellent. And there's chainmail, a replica 9mm as well. There's also some homemade stuff like a sawed-off paddle. There's some bamboo stakes, as well as a whole bunch of cans of spray paint. But there's also, in among this as well, is what's a sledgehammer. There's also a crossbow and a chainsaw that was taken off a man who was actually, and who was arrested and charged in a separate incident from the demonstrations that happened downtown. And Police Chief Blair did say that should not have been part of the display here.
Here's another pic. This was Mad as Hell headline of the angry protesters the day after the G20, right in front of Toronto Police Headquarters. Bill Blair had a lot to answer for. If you notice in this small article right here, they had it hidden in the side, but this was a major story throughout the whole summer. Bill Blair vows to hunt down the vandals. They had a most wanted list released all the time. Basically, majority of everyone, all the vandals, most wanted vandals weren't black masked, weren't black blocs, so That's a big question here about how this whole thing was done. Here we've got the headline of the markets right after, everything down. If you notice, right after the G20 Toronto, markets failed to rally. There was no major announcement. The whole announcement was something about a 2013 cutting the deficit. Didn't really say much. This I cut out actually from today's paper. G20's failure means Canada will pay the price. This is a headline from Korea. Same 20 leaders, almost the exact same 20 that were here in June in Toronto. And then, of course, I ended off here with a Toronto Media Co-op just to support the local media outlets. A place you can find more info. Search toronto.mediacoop.ca. Police brutality. There's going to be no probe of the wild weekend. So what we're out here doing, we're handing out DVDs. We got G20 Exposed. We've got some DVDs that I made, like the Hogtown Disaster DVD.
It's Toronto G20 Exposed.ca.
I've explained it to you already.
So these people are walking by. Do you guys have ID? You're all supposed to have ID to show the police. They're gonna arrest me for not showing ID.
Are you gonna provide ID to me?
No, I want to actually document this. I'm a documentary filmmaker.
I need your ID.
I can show you my ID, yes.
Okay, then show it.
But I refuse to.
We're Canadian patriots here, standing up for the truth. So check it out. You can take a DVD. You can watch it online. Toronto G20 Exposed.ca. Come and check it out, people.
All right, word of mouth. We're here at the Toronto Mayor's debate. We got a guest here. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Well, I'm the man who will be mayor, and I'm Kevin Clark. Our Prime Minister did not spend any money to protect the people of Toronto. So I have a special message, and this message is for all protesters of G20. I am Kevin Mark Clark. I have made Canadian history. I am the first G20 arrest. I was brutally arrested on Sunday at 1:30 by the RCMP. I went to a Blue Jay game, and there was a big fence, and I took a left turn, and my skate snapped. I stopped on a wall to take my skate off. A man in plain clothes came up behind me, and he says, "Buddy, what are you doing?" I was about to say, "What do you think I'm doing?" Before I said taking my skates off, he grabbed me in the headlock. Then he tripped me over his feet, and he threw me head first into the concrete. And when I tried to get up, the RCMP officer jumped on my back. And then he yanked my hands behind me. And then the RCMP officer yanked me up. And my skates were half off. And he dragged me. I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "You're under arrest." I said, "What am I under arrest for?" He said, "You're under arrest." I said, "What am I under arrest for?" "For coming in this area." And he yanked me up. And he put me to sit down on a ledge. And when I sat down on that ledge, I was thirsty as damn hell. And then 2 vans pull up. And out of it came a bunch of RCMP officers. And they said, "You're under arrest." I said, "What am I arrested for?" "Am I arrested for trying to take my skates off because I bust my skate?" And then he says, "You're under arrest for performing an indecent act." I says, "What's the indecent act?" He said, "You were urinating. A natural bodily function as taking a pee when your body requires it. Even if the man was urinating, does that give the RCMP grounds to throw him head first into a concrete ground?"
Some of the tough questions we're starting to deal with here in terms of building a strong framework for strong, sustainable, and balanced growth going forward, and in particular, the problems we have with current account imbalances and the currency controversies. Look, I think it's fair to say we did not resolve those issues here. We have got a process for continued engagement. We've got a timeline around that. These are not going to be easy issues to resolve.
Now, where it happened was right by the first Canadian place. And I am giving the details to all provincial level of government, all municipal city councils, and all federal member of parliament. Above my head was a round-based camera, which would have caught the whole incident. Now, I am the most arrested man wrongfully by the Metro Toronto Police. And today, I must commend the law enforcement of the City of Toronto. I thought they were the worst, baddest, most brutal, unlawful cops in the world. But the Royal Canadian Mounted Police right here has shown that there is worse actions that can be committed. My issue here today is for the safety and the security of the 2.3 million people in this city that I run as a candidate to represent. $920 million have been spent to put a fence around, create jobs, and to protect 20 wannabe world leaders.
And it's just good to get people out of poverty and give them opportunity. What I've also said is that precisely because of China's success, it's very important that it act in a responsible fashion internationally. The issue of the RMB is one that is an irritant not just to the United States, but is an irritant to a lot of China's trading partners and those who are competing with China to sell goods around the world. It is undervalued.
But there has been $0 spent to protect the people of this city from the abuse of authority by those who are employed for security. And if a man could have been brutally attacked, brutally thrown headfirst into a concrete on an allegation that he was urinating, imagine if I was protesting. I would probably be dead. I was coming from a baseball game. What's going to happen to the homeless people in this city? What if they come down here on Saturday and Sunday? I'm encouraging you not to. I'm encouraging all protesters in this city not to protest at Queen's Park, not to protest at Allen Gardens. I ask all leaders of protesters to take your protest to the place you can make some influence. Post Road is at Don Mills above Eglinton. It is the most expensive area in the city. And those people who organize G20 will either live on Post Road or the Bridle Path. That's where the $1 million homes are. That's where the bankers live. I ask you to take your protest to the Bridle Path and to Post Road and send a message to those who think that when you're given power, that money gives you influence. Influence comes from the love you give to all in the time of need.
Wrap it up. Yeah, here we got the posters. Nice. Great artwork. We've given this away to a few of the police officers today. They're responding pretty well to the artwork and the actual DVD. I've been giving them away for free.
Let's just fire it up, folks. Wrong phrase, I guess. Fire it up. Anybody has any comment about either during the weekend or the aftermath of it? What should be done? Sarah, you've got your hand up first.
I think that there were a group of thugs that just ruined the event for some real legitimate protesters.
So what should have happened?
I really believe the thugs should have been managed well, but apparently they weren't prepared for that. Unfortunately, the legitimate protesters who really wanted to be heard couldn't be heard because all the focus and media attention went towards these damages.
I thought what was disturbing, I live in neighborhoods that were affected by Allen Gardens and by Young College and such, is that in a circumstance where there were 15,000 additional police officers in the city of Toronto, that the 5,500, I think, approximately police officers that we have in Toronto on that day weren't assigned to actually protect those things, those neighborhoods, in the way that they normally would. And I think that was really disturbing to people.
You know what, you either support the police or you don't support the police here. This is black or white. I support the police. You know what? They were taunted. Their horses are getting knocked off their horses. Their police cars are getting burned. And you're sticking up for the protesters. You know what?
Should there have been more action on Saturday?
Absolutely. If I was the mayor, I would have told the chief, and I'm not going to control the police force whatsoever, but I would have said to Chief Blair, I said, well, please move in on Saturday night. I would have asked them to move in. You know what? Because we would have sat here and look what happened. And these police were taunted. They were spat at. There were bottles were thrown at them. And you know what? And you just sit here and let and take it and take it. I don't believe in having this judicial review. This is going to cost millions and millions of dollars. Look at the images. Look at the police. Look at these people getting beaten up. The police were getting, everything was going on. It was unbelievable what was going on.
But you said that as a mayor you would direct the police. You just said that.
I would ask the police chief to move in.
If you're the police, where are your badges? Badges? We ain't got no badges. We don't need no badges. I don't have to show you any stinking badge.
There he is. There we go. Awesome.
This is awesome video.
Yeah, it's not bad, right? It's good quality.
You were there filming it?
Yeah, I was. Well, no, I was.
These officers that you're mentioning that arrested you that were in plain clothes, were you able to ever find out what if they were Toronto police, or do you know what?
I have images of them through YouTube. One of them that berated me the worst was Scary Lady. She's quite popular on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I've got pictures, not pictures, but YouTube footage of the other two cops, and it'll be up to the Toronto police to identify. They should have been Toronto officers, though.
Looking at the back, Officer Bubbles, Scary Cop Lady, Eden Center guy, Steve Paikin, Stephen Harper.
Toronto G20 Exposed.ca. There is a movie starring, amongst others, Officer Bubbles.
A YouTube video showing a confrontation between a G20 protester and an officer has gone viral and is making headlines around the world.
Officer Bubbles has quickly become a household name in much of Canada and abroad.
Suing YouTube for $1.2 million against a political cartoonist and 25 individual commenters. So as a graphic designer, as an artist, what do you feel about having political freedom of speech and then being under attack for your artistry? Like, imagine that this guy can't take criticism, but he has to go after individual commenters on YouTube because, you know what? He threatened to arrest a woman for blowing bubbles. Blowing bubbles, yeah. Like these bubbles weren't normal bubbles; they were assaulting bubbles. In his terms, yeah. So like we have him on the back of the DVD right here. So I'll show you. On the back of the DVD, we feature Officer Bubbles because he was coined by the media. Officer Bubbles. I didn't coin him that term, but he was termed that on Fox News and CBC. Why? Why? Because, well, it was unprecedented that he would try to arrest somebody for blowing bubbles.
If the bubble touches me, I'm going to be arrested for assault. Do you understand?
It's a mockery of us making comments because we have the right to criticize. You know, in a free and open and a democratic society, we should have the right to say whatever is on our mind. You know, and Officer Bubbles is going after cartoonists now. Cartoons are now assault. Political free speech is now under attack. But I mean, that's why it sets the precedent that we need to get the information out. And if you want to check out the video, it's Toronto G20 Exposed.ca. And we have the movie there for free. We want people to be informed, to be educated.
They can't deny it because the guy from, TVO Ontario, who's known right across the country, said those kids were doing no wrong. They were peaceful. They never heard anything. They didn't set any cars on fire. The Black Bloc, they were the guys who did it. Nobody else but them. See you guys.
There's the Toronto G20 Exposed.
Do you think the G20 set any sort of precedent? You're aware of the bigger picture, so what do you think is going to happen in the future if they could do this?
This G20 is basically a traveling circus of tyranny, as I like to call it. no matter where they go all over the world, different cities, not only are they conditioning the people to go along with this tyranny, but they also are conditioning the various police forces to enforce these things.
I was standing peacefully at the front lines of the G20, and I got my head split open, I got my nose broken, and I got my eyes plugged into kabam. And then I was threatened after I was taken behind the two police, those metal bandwagons, and they threatened to kill me if I were to speak any more about this. The fact of the matter is that a lot of those guys were from the American military, and they had far more training than just Canadian policemen. It seems that anyone who was speaking publicly on a microphone at Queen's Park, they had restrictions when they got charged, saying if you start preaching, if you start saying anything about the G20 in the public, you are going to be arrested. I was threatened several times. They said if I open my mouth, I will spend 5 years in prison. Well, I have my charges dropped. Here I am. Why is it such a crime for us to speak out against the government?
It's going to be, from the people, their stories of what they went through here, in Toronto during the G20. So we're going to let the people of Toronto speak for the film and just lay it out there.
Ask yourselves. I hang around the streets all the time. Those black bloc gangs were undercover policemen. There is only 1 or 2 of them that actually did anything. I was held for 30 hours. Many people I know who were arrested, who were on the G20 most wanted list, were arrested because their Facebook constantly posted their status. If you want to get off the system, how about you turn off your TVs, you read, and you get yourself off of these social networking sites?
We want support from the public. We want them to be educated and to be informed of what happened during G20.
Oh no, this is the threat right now. Everyone's going to get arrested if they don't leave. Yet there is no exit. There actually is no exit. There actually is no exit. They want us to move, but there is no exit. Word up, we're back on the scene here at Queen and Spadina. If this intersection looks familiar at all, that's because last time I was here filming with my camera, I was stuck in a kettling experience. That's right, 4 hours in this intersection in the pouring rain. Well, now people are out. It is on a Saturday. It's July 2010. And people are out demanding some civil liberties now. Civil liberties now, an independent inquiry needed. That's the call right now. We're at the front of the march. The march has marched from Queen's Park all the way down to Queen and Spadina, the scene of the kettling drill. We're here. Word up. Toronto Truth Seekers, Toronto Media Co-op, CKLN Radio, word of mouth, word is bond, word.
David Miller, the city councillors, Bill Blair, Julian Fantino, and their bosses in the Integrated Security Unit, McGinty, Harper, everyone who is calling for Toronto to forget, for Toronto to enjoy its summer, they must know that we will not be silenced about this.
1,000 people turned out to Queen's Park today for a civil liberties rally and march.
Student, labor, and community groups organized the rally to demand an independent public inquiry into security at the G20 summit.
More than 1,000 protesters took to the streets today, representing labor, student, and native rights groups, all with one unified message. They want a public and full judicial inquiry into the actions of police during the G20 weekend. They began their march at the Ontario Legislature, went through the streets, stopping at one of the intersections where numerous people, they say, were illegally detained over the G20 weekend.
protest marched through the streets of downtown Toronto. It wasn't as big as expected. Still, about 1,000 people took to the streets today in a protest march.
As Canadian citizens, we have the right to peacefully assemble. We have the right to protest. Those rights were trampled on 2 weeks ago. They arrested 300 mostly innocent people at that corner. We're taking the streets back.
Demonstrators, politicians, and labor leaders demanding a public inquiry over police conduct during the G20 weekend.
We want the full public inquiry. We want to get to the bottom of it. We want to see who was making the decisions.
I'm entitled to know why this damage was left to happen with $1 billion worth of policing.
Protesters are convinced police overreacted and trampled on civil liberties. Still, few will forget the weekend of violence. Store windows smashed and police cars torched at Queen and Spadina. 1,000 people arrested, some still in custody.
It gave draconian and arbitrary powers of arrest and detention to police officers and private guards. And so it's very concerning to our democracy and to the rule of law.
And we're sitting here to take this corner back and say the streets belong to the people in this city.
The protest was peaceful. It included a sit-down at Queen and Spadina, a retaking of an intersection that demonstrators claim belongs to the people, not the police. The Toronto Police Services Board has agreed to a civilian review. Demonstrators want a full-scale, independent provincial inquiry.
Ho, ho! Stephen Harper's got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Stephen Harper's got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Bill Blair's got to go!
And in Canada, you're allowed to be served in both English and French. French is my first language. They refuse to do that. Really? They give me no explanation as to why I need to move right now. No, dude, I just want to say that's very brave because you stood up for them. And I've seen too many people today get arrested violently, so I was just concerned about you because they're not really acting like human beings today.
Well, I know some people don't like it. It's a loss of national sovereignty, but it is a simple reality. It is a simple reality.
Merci beaucoup, mon ami. Bonne chance avec aujourd'hui.
If you keep moving, there's an exit. But nobody keeps moving.
There's no exit.
We're surrounded.
We're surrounded. Where is that? That's it. Just communicate. You're just marching. Why don't you communicate? Communicate there's a fucking exit. You're just marching. You're just marching. Say so. Where's your loudspeaker? I'm the producer of Toronto G20 Exposed.ca. We want the public to know what happened during G20. We're calling for a public inquiry. And we got the movie here. It's the documentary that you should see. So we only want people that are interested. If you want to know the truth, this is the DVD to have in your hand. Mainstream media isn't going to show you the real stories that weren't broadcasted.
Is for no reason, according to many demonstrators and people who were just at this intersection. Some were arrested and then released, and some were just held in the rain for 4 hours and then released. And one of those is the plaintiff, Sherry Good. She is the plaintiff in this case, but 800 people, maybe even more, are going to be named in this class action lawsuit. It's asking for $45 million, and the defendants in the case, the Toronto Police Services Board, as well as the RCMP. So I am joined now by Derek Sobral. He was on the streets of Toronto, and you are going to be joining this class action lawsuit. Derek, tell me why.
Well, I'm a citizen of Toronto, and I care about what happens in my city, in our city. And what I witnessed on the G20 summit was appalling. What happened, innocent people were being detained, illegal searches, secret laws passed in private, a security law fence rule, which came out to be misleading.
Holding people in the rain for hours and even arrested bystanders. 900 were arrested in all. It became the biggest mass arresting in Canadian history. I went down to the temporary detention center, a film studio, to see my friends who had been arrested. Just as I got there, people were being released. Then I found my friend Kimia, who told me her story.
We were doing a peaceful protest in the streets yesterday. We did a sit-in in front of Novotel. We were arrested for not leaving when we were asked to, supposedly. We were never asked to leave, and they surrounded us. There was no way for us to leave. People wanted to. There were spectators who just came to watch who got arrested. We live in a democracy. It's our right to protest in the face of injustice, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
I met others who were badly beaten.
They're basically hitting my skull with their boots, and they're telling me stop resisting, when I was not even resisting. I was lying still.
And some had stories that scared me.
Stole my camera. Stole my $6,000 camera. My name's Adam McIsaac. I stopped my bike because police were illegally searching people. I produced my media pass. They said this isn't real. They took it. I was told to back up for the safety of the police. I backed up. I complied. And then I was thrown down, kicked, elbows. They tasered me right here in the groin. And then when I asked them, did you taser me? They denied it. They just assumed that I was an anarchist. $1.3 billion for what? To beat the shit out of people that produce media?
There's now outrage pouring over the police tactics and the abuse of human rights. Rallies were held.
Over this past weekend, the Toronto street medics were prevented from providing care. In several instances, some of us were detained despite being clearly marked as medics.
Some Canadians are pushing for an inquiry. Support is streaming from Facebook and Twitter, while some activists are making sure they never forget what happened by tattooing symbols of the G8, G20 on themselves.
I came down here from Montreal to protest the G20, and I am so glad that I did, and I was so horrified to see what went down. I was arrested and detained for 28 hours, 27 of which were in handcuffs in horrendous conditions.
There are many questions unanswered. Like, what were the cops doing?
I know one of the things that was confusing was a lot of people got arrested that were just walking. But the reason that they got arrested is because they had been identified for a criminal offense. A lot of people seeing that will go, oh, what are we arresting them for? They haven't done anything. I'm sure we have to justify all our arrests, and I'm sure that's probably what happened.
On the Saturday, when there was a rampage by the Black Bloc on the more violent protesters, they were kind of tearing through the city. I noticed several times the police were kind of just standing off and just standing there, and they weren't kind of intervening. Why was that?
If it's property damage, that's one thing. But if they see a citizen that's in trouble or an assault, yeah, they're gonna leave their post to deal with something like that. Public safety is paramount.
Don't fight.
It's like called something of peace. Like they take, what's it called? It's like disturbing the peace. Like they take you and then they let you go.
Extra chapters included and a nice menu. And it comes, when you buy it online, you can go to Toronto G20 Exposed.ca and you can get a nice copy. It comes factory sealed, nice artwork on the DVD itself as well. And we do recommend people make copies and hand them out.
The G20 investigative team unveiled pictures of 11 outstanding suspects wanted in connection with summit unrest. So far, police have made 17 G20-related arrests, including a number this week. They face a total of 41 criminal charges. Detective Mike Carboni says police have the public to thank.
We have able to collect over 20,000 images, and they, like I said initially, came from the members of the public. We have other sources. The internet is part of some of these sources, but for the most part, they've come from the members of the public, and I'm very grateful for that. I know the rest of our team is very happy that that we've got them.
Police say there are far more arrests to be made, including some out of province. Up to now, all of the alleged troublemakers have been picked up in Ontario.
What happened on the streets of this city in terms of the G20 was enormous and hasn't been taken stock of even by the progressive movements to a sufficient degree. There was a virtual elimination of civil liberties, and not just that people were round up on completely outrageous charges, conspiracy and other such things, but that the police functioned for several days as if the normal body of civil liberties that have been attained in this country had completely existed. Now, certainly homeless people at Dundas and Sherbourne wouldn't have been particularly surprised by the kind of treatment that people were receiving, but it became a generalised treatment. As everybody knows, the breach of the peace stuff, where they can arrest people on a presumption of an impending breach of the peace, was used to the point that people going home, people that had nothing to do with protest, were rounded up and incarcerated for hours on end. People were stopped and illegally searched on a massive basis.
What happened in Toronto with the burning cop cars, you know?
Cops were kind of just chilling and just waiting for their cue to move. So then we turn around and walk back up north, and then all of a sudden the police vans come boom, 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 right up to College. Stop there, everybody getting out of their vans and then putting their equipment on and masks, gas masks and gloves and shields and everything like that. It was quite the thing. And our own Peel cops were there too, right in front of me. Serge, he goes right up where the vans were, and one of the cops is going bang, bang, bang on his equipment to get back. So he had to come back to where I was standing. And then all of a sudden the police got out, went up, they ran up to College there, and all of a sudden you could hear their guns going off. And I think it's probably the rubber bullet ones going pop, 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 you know. So then I phoned my brother, who was just north of me, I guess on the Queen's Park side, and he saw that SUV being damaged by probably Black Bloc. I said, so what were the police doing at the time? And my brother actually said that the police were actually doing nothing. They did absolutely nothing. They didn't even engage these people. He says once Black Bloc got their cue to move in, then Black Bloc moved out, and the police got their cue to move in afterward to secure the whole area. So that's when everything started happening. And then we moved more east, back over here to Dundas Square. Once we reached here, we just decided to stay here and just hand out information. So, and then while we were doing that, just up Yonge Street, where the Black Bloc were coming up, where no police were being involved in this, the Black Bloc were going up there, smashing all the windows, which I could hear from here, and some guy yelling and screaming at the top here. And I didn't want to go up there afterwards, so I decided to stay here, give out information, and then eventually decided to pack it up and go home. So I walked up Yonge Street, through all the glass on the side of the road, stuff like that. Still a lot of people hanging around, a lot of workers from some of these stores up here were boarding up their windows and sweeping up all the glass and stuff like that. Quite the hectic day, and to me, I've seen enough already, you know, that's enough for me. Seeing all the chaos and the Black Bloc doing whatever they could do. They got the green light to do whatever they wanted, you know. And the burning police cars, to me, that was a staged event. All staged event. Probably torched by the police anyway. And to me, it looked kind of Hollywood, really. Because I saw CNN here, the CNN truck parked on the side street. And I'm looking, I said, oh, here we go. Here goes all the propaganda and the misinformation and stuff like that. So I saw them, and so the police cars were basically a good photo op for all these big media corporations and that, eh? So that was all staged. So the G20 was all staged, you could tell.
Okay, do it again, but don't walk as fast because I lose it behind you. Okay.
3, 2, 1. These riot police behind me are some of the reasons why activists here in Toronto ahead of the G20 and G8 summit all week have called this a police state.
So that was my day trip to G20.
So yeah, there's some heavy conditioning going on, and we're going to counter that propaganda.
Sounds good. Dan Dix from PressForTruth.ca, VJ Sarma from WhatYouWantToBelieveIn.com.
And then for the G20 summit recently, I was postering and flyering like a maniac before it
during it and after it to make sure it never happened again, because I saw that as the most traumatic event in this city's history, where 20,000 cops, troops, mercs, and spooks were sent to lock down this city like a giant prison, kick us out of downtown for a week in the summer. And I've seen how our police has acted before then and since then, and they don't normally act like they did at the G20 summit. But, most of us will, quote unquote, do our jobs. And so we have to make sure, as my first platform priority, that we, we keep an eye on what those jobs are. So I really want a full, inquiry into the G20 summit, which I, looked at very, very closely, sort of the G20 martial law, and then following that, the Caravana martial law light, where there was a way too big of a police presence there. Very, very peaceful. Nothing happened between 1,000 cops and 10,000 young black people partying, but they shouldn't have been forced to hang out with each other in such close quarters. The cops should have been nearby, as opposed to forced to mingle with the crowds aggressively. So it seems like someone's trying to use our authorities, our law enforcement authorities, as a stick to whack us like a baby seal. And so I'd like to track back, who that is, and look at the federal government's role and the RCMP's role, who got $500 million of the $1 billion spent on security in what happened at the G20, as opposed to just focusing on the police themselves. And so the first thing is, making sure G20 martial law never happens again.
We're with TorontoTruthSeekers.com and Toronto G20 Exposed.ca. Break it down for us.
How's it going, guys? Yeah, this is the new DVD, the first one in Canadian history. This movie is it's showing that the Canadian Charter rights and freedoms were violated during the G20, and there needs to be accountability. So I've been actually giving out a lot of these for free to police officers, because we want them to be informed and educated on what happened with other police officers. It's the first one in Canadian history. We just want people to be aware, and it's important because each and every person needs to know what the Canadian Charter rights and freedoms are.
And this is sexy, man. You make this look good. The DVD cover looks good. The T-shirt,
got a shirt there.
Posters look good. The back of the shirt's the same as the back of the DVD cover. I mean, we got to fight for our freedom. We got to fight for our rights. But getting creative with it is a great way to validate yourself in this world. Yeah, this is nothing against the police, nothing against anything like that. There were other parties involved, the feds involved, and as Dan Dix from PressForTruth.ca brilliantly said, the G20 is kind of like a traveling circus of tyranny, where basically everywhere they go, like in Pittsburgh last year and then in Toronto this year, they just lock down cities, mess with people, send thousands of cops, riot gear. And there are things we can do here, like calmly and consistently sharing information.
Yeah, it's great because we want the public to know that Canada is going to be a different country if we don't speak out. It's the most important time in history to speak out, because it's going to be a North American Union. It was formed at the SPP, the Security Partnership and Prosperity. And this is Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. Now, these closed-door meetings, they're instituting this agenda where they're going to get rid of sovereignty on record. So when they do trample on Canadian rights, the Canadian Charter, okay, which allows us to have freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of press. When they do trample on those rights, what they want to do is they want to reconstitute a new charter, okay, that includes all three of those countries. So when Canada is being sold out in the name of globalism, we need people to be aware and to be outspoken about it. Everybody needs to know that Canada is not going to be Canada anymore, and it's already happening behind closed doors. So when this G20 steering committee goes into cities, they're implementing this agenda, and they're doing it with austerity measures. And that means to cut deficits by half by 2013. So all over the world, in Romania and Ecuador, they're actually doing that. They're taking away pensions from people. And people are protesting all around the world because of this, and they're in the streets, and police are actually joining with the protesters. We shouldn't have to be afraid to speak in public. So that's why the movie's so important, because we believe in freedom, we believe in Canada, and we're standing up for this country. We count ourselves as Canadian patriots, and that's why we believe that this is the most important time to speak out.
2010, pretty close to 2012, the North American Union. For more on that, see PressForTruth.ca, the new film United We Fall, where Dan Dix, Brian Law, the filmmakers, interview many top globalists, as they're known, basically high-level bureaucrats in the Canadian government, American government, who implement or draft legislation that merges us into a European Union-style trading bloc for an eventual merger into a world government trading system. So there's a bigger agenda at work, folks. See Toronto G20 Exposed.ca for more on the G20's part in all this. See pressfortruth.ca, see youtube.com/support local scene. See whatyouwanttobeleivein.com for my own campaign to be mayor of Toronto, or at least introduce issues into the campaign that we should definitely work on getting something done about. And yeah, best of luck out there. We got a great city, we got a great country, and even though there's crazy things going on, if we get creative, we can handle it.
Word up, Toronto Truth Seekers here, Saturday Street Action. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, my name's Sam from Montreal, Sam Labrier. And I was just saying, my buddy Danny and his wife, they were at the G20. It's too bad they're not here to give the story themselves, but they were arrested at the G20 in a gymnasium. They were sleeping with a bunch of other Quebec protesters that had come down. They were being sheltered at the university in a gymnasium, and the cops came in, just woke everybody up and took everybody out. He was in jail for, I think, 45 hours, and she was in jail for just under 65 hours, like 62, something like that. So it was definite like psychological torment and trauma on them. They were definitely traumatized for weeks afterwards. Police state brutality at its finest.
For real. Do you think that they were targeted because they were on the campus, the university campus? Like, do you think the U of T was targeted? Or?
Yeah, they were targeted because they were protesters. They were from Montreal. And after the fake Black Bloc false flag attacks on downtown Toronto, the police had every reason that they needed to just do mass arrests, with no evidence at all. And so that was just another one of the many mass arrests that they made in the day or two after the Black Bloc false flag riots. And he was just in court the other day, and as many people were. And the Crown, or whoever, the prosecutor, admitted that they have no evidence whatsoever on them. They have no video footage, no photos, no testimony from anyone of them doing anything wrong. And yet they are being arraigned on these charges. And it's like, well, how? I mean, this is a complete travesty of justice, The whole point of justice is that you have the evidence before you file the charges, And then you can see the evidence against them. But they're saying, no. We're pressing the charges first, and then we're going to find the evidence. It's a complete travesty of justice. And this is not an isolated case. This is most people's case. It was a mass arrest. They didn't have evidence. It was one big sweep,
A press conference right after the G20, the mayor of Toronto, David Miller, was saying, he made some quote about how the people that did the damage in the G20 came from out of town or something. They weren't from Toronto. And then I noticed that it seemed like the people from Quebec were being targeted. Do you think that there was targeting of people from Quebec, and have you seen these kind of tactics in Quebec?
I think definitely the rivalry between Toronto and Montreal allows for easy scapegoating amongst the general Toronto populace of Montreal protesters. You can easily just sort of paint them as the ones to blame, and everybody in Toronto will just be like, oh yeah, it's Montreal's fault, of course, who else, And these guys were just regular peaceful protesters. They're anti-globalization, anti-G20, IMF, World Bank, that kind of thing. A lot of Noam Chomsky fans and things like that. These people are not violent police car burning people. They were sleeping peacefully in a gymnasium, and they were just rounded up for no reason, with no evidence at all. The truth of the matter is these people were just peaceful protesters like everything else. Like, the Black Bloc were not real protesters. They're police officers. The truth about that is coming out more and more every day. It's only going to be a matter of time before citizen journalists expose the Black Bloc once and for all. The tactic is getting more and more useless by the day for the police to use, because we're all waking up and realizing that it's not actually protesters, it's actually the police under those black masks.
What we saw at the end of June was the G20 here in Toronto, and it was basically like martial law lockdown of the whole downtown Toronto. So I guess like with where we're at in this day and age, like at this time, do you think that it's like, are you seeing a lot of your past things that you've written about in the Mohawk Nation News coming true? What are your thoughts on the New World Order that's emerging here?
Well, I see that a lot of non-native people who stand up to the authorities are being, falsely charged, being brutalized. They're beginning to be treated like native people. And I think it's kind of shocking to people to be treated like that. And somehow, we've grown up knowing that that's the way we're treated, with disdain, with violations of our human rights, racism. This we've experienced all our lives from the day we're born. And so now non-native people are experiencing it, and I don't know if they know what to do.
If you notice behind me, there's some folks with signs. A couple dozen people here. The rally has not quite started, but organizers tell us they're hoping for about 100 to 200 people. This is in solidarity with the G20 defendants.
We have got a police service that bows to no one. We have got a police service that does not listen to the civilian oversight that is put in place, does not listen to their community. And we need a police service that acts a lot differently than the one we saw at the last weekend of June. The other thing I want to remind all of us, for those of us who up until that weekend had not had much to do with police officers in Toronto, let alone OPP and RCMP. Police officers wear a name badge, something that identifies them, so that when you or I are confronted with an aggressive, overbearing, arrogant officer, we know what their name is, we can take a complaint forward. What did we see during the G20? Badges covered up, torn off, almost no ability to hold officers accountable for what they're doing. In 2005, no, earlier than that, our former police chief, Julian Fantino, wanted the ability to strip search everybody who was detained by the police service. That's what he asked for in 2002. Toronto Police Accountability Coalition and other activists said, no, you have to abide by the Supreme Court decision. It's a golden decision. Look it up. You can only strip search someone if you have a bona fide reason to believe that they are carrying weapons upon their person, or if they are carrying drugs. What did we see during the G20 arrest? Mass strip searches.
Our next speaker is Jonah Hundred, who is currently working on the support committee for the 17 organizers charged with conspiracy.
These people were arrested in house raids Saturday morning and picked up out of cabs on their way to press conferences and off the street on that day before any of the property destruction happened on that day. They are not accused of violent crimes. These people were targeted for their politics. These people were targeted because they are effective community organizers. They were targeted because they fight alongside Indigenous leaders, alongside land defenders, on behalf of immigrants, on behalf of marginalized communities across Southern Ontario and Quebec. And for that, they are arrested and facing extremely serious jail time. For one thing, we are now faced with raising over hundreds of thousands of dollars for the Legal Defense Fund. And that is money that could be spent elsewhere, but we need to do this to support all these defendants. And it is important to support all of the G20 defendants. Even more important is that we do not let them stop us. We do not let them kill our momentum. That we keep moving forward, we keep growing stronger, we build solidarity, and we build momentum. We cannot let them intimidate us. We cannot let them silence us.
Over 70 individuals were arrested while sleeping on a gym floor at the Graduate Students' Union office. Only a block away were out-of-town security personnel cozily accommodated in residences that students were kicked out of. It's as if it's a crime now for students to organize on their own campus. And so while they try to continue to divide us and immobilize us with various tactics to squelch dissent, like bogus bail conditions, exorbitant legal fees,
fear-mongering, trauma, and intimidation, we will not cave to these attempts to criminalize dissent.
Known as Illegal is a community-based organization that fights for migrant justice and status for all.
The unprecedented violence we saw was completely unjustified, and the 75 charges that were dropped today is just one sign of that, and we know that these charges aren't going to stick. We know that as we keep going, as we keep fighting and mobilizing, that more and more charges are going to get dropped, and more of our friends and activists and community organizers are going to be found completely innocent. Whether you're facing detention and charges because of the G20, whether you're homeless on the east side and facing police harassment, whether you're an immigrant facing deportation at the hands of the CBSA, we are not going to leave you behind, and we are going to keep fighting until everyone is free. At the same time, we can't forget why the G20 leaders were here in June, what they were here to do, and that was to impose an austerity agenda. What does that mean? Thank you, I completely agree. Now please keep your hands up, keep your hands up. Everyone who's part of an organization in Toronto that fights against poverty, that fights for immigrant rights, that fights for Indigenous sovereignty, get your hand up in the air. And everyone here who's going to continue to fight against the G20 austerity agenda, put your hand up in the air. And I want you to take that hand, turn it into a fist, and look around and see the strength we have in this movement, and know that we're going to continue to fight and we're going to win. Thank you.
Many of those charges were actually dropped today, and I think that it's really important to think about what that means. That means that those people whose charges were dropped, the police and the courts know that they don't even have a shred of evidence. And it's not just those people, the people whose charges were dropped. It's lots of other people. There were also many people who were offered diversions, which basically means, if you're offered a diversion, that basically means that you can pay a little bit of money, $50, $100, and have your charges dropped, okay? Now, I don't know why paying some money...
We're not saying that everybody has to leave, we're saying that officially the official program for the rally is over.
My name's Barry Weisletter. I'm a co-editor of Socialist Action newspaper. These people have a right to demonstrate and to voice their opposition to the G20 agenda, and that's actually what I would like to talk about, if that's okay, because while it's important to defend civil liberties against the police and the state, we shouldn't lose sight of the economic agenda, which is the cause of the protest in the first place. Unfortunately, a number of people in groups that were heavily infiltrated by the police created a situation in which the cops and the Harper government can point to isolated acts of violence against store windows and police cars, which the police tolerated. In fact, they watched while these acts were carried out in order to attempt to justify their enormous expenditures on so-called security issues, ignoring vital needs in terms of health, education, social housing, public transportation, and other things I mentioned. There's a need for a full, open public inquiry, full spectrum inquiry into police actions.
Not much of a turnout at Police HQ for a protest, nonetheless, but protesters protesting the mass arrest of the protesters during the G20 summit. Could be a result of a long day in court for more than 300 people arrested on summit weekend.
Well, today was just the first court appearance for most of the G20 protesters, and some of them had their charges dropped, and others were being bribed by being offered to, if they made a donation to a charity, they would have the charges dropped. And that's kind of ridiculous, because if they had valid evidence, they shouldn't have given any reason to drop the charges whatsoever. It's a way of allowing the police to say, yeah, they took the deal, so they must have been guilty. And so what we did was okay. But a number of us aren't taking any of those deals. There's only maybe room in the court for 20, 25 people. And so they'd fill the court, 25 people, and then as people were being dealt with, they'd let other people go in. And this kept going on all morning. And finally, like if you weren't at the door when they were letting people out, you couldn't get in. So the whole thing was it was like chaos, complete chaos. Hardly anybody knew what was going on. They had some duty counsel explaining things to people who were outside of the courtroom because they couldn't explain them any other way. They had to deal with groups of 10 or 15 people at a time, trying to explain to them what to do, what to expect, because most of these people have never been in court before, and this is the situation. The PA system didn't work. They were supposed to be calling people's names out. There was nothing. It was absolutely mayhem inside the courthouse, and trying to get heard was absolutely ridiculous. If you had a lawyer, though, it went very well. The lawyers got first crack at everything, and if you had a lawyer, you'd be in and out, and that'd be it. They're gone. It's absolutely ridiculous. I hope that my lawyer will just convince them that, hey, drop the charges and be done with it. And that's the sort of thing, because it's absolutely ridiculous.
For real. And do you have any more details on this bribe? What was this offer that they were offering?
What they were doing was they were offering people that had obstruction charges if they paid a fee, somewhere from $25 to $100, and maybe signed a peace bond or something, they would drop the charges. The charges would be withdrawn. If you had gone to this diversion office and chose to make a donation of $25 to $75, whatever the Crown decided you had to do, and then they would look at this receipt you gave them, and the charges would be automatically, they would just withdraw them. That was it. Game over. But you still have the knowledge that you acquiesced to what the police wanted, what the Crown wanted, and that, in fact, you could be looked at as being guilty of what you had been charged with. And so there's this situation that didn't make a lot of sense, and it was, in reality, it is a bribe, and there's no way around it. It smells, it stinks, and it should never have happened. It's either the charges were solid enough to go forward, or they weren't, and dropping them was the only option. But they couldn't drop so many without getting some other action going, because it would make them look really bad. And it's all about saving face for the Toronto Police Force and the Crown prosecution, because they work hand in hand. It's too bad, but that's the way it is. I'm not afraid of what I say. Whether people, they might not like it, but I'm not afraid of saying stuff. So that's good.
For real, yeah. Thanks a lot, Selwyn Frit.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. My name's Miriam Adrengi, and I organize with the Toronto Community Mobilization Network, and I was here today with the Toronto Community Solidarity Network.
And what was the purpose of this rally here, a 6 p.m. rally at the Toronto Police Headquarters?
Well, it was definitely a follow-up to what happened this morning, which was that 303 people were called into court today, all people facing G20-related charges, politically motivated, trumped-up, ridiculous charges of, and these people were amongst the over 1,000 people, over 1,100 people who were arrested during the G20, who were also among the over 40,000 people who were out in the streets demanding human rights and sharing the values that millions of people around the world share.
What was the G20 weekend like for you? Were you charged at all, or were you?
Yeah, I was arrested just after coming from a press conference where I was talking about police brutality, and about 50 of us were kettled on the sidewalk, not allowed to leave, and I was pulled out of the crowd and arrested. Yeah, they just arrested me on breach of the peace, drove me around in a paddy wagon for about 5 hours, and released me, all charges dropped. So really, this was just one of the cases of police intimidation that had been happening. My charges were dropped actually immediately after I got released. So I was driven around in a paddy wagon, brought to the detention center for about 10 minutes, and released right away. Charges dropped right then and there. So it's really just bringing inconvenience to people and sending the message: stay off the streets, don't demand rights, don't organize in your community. And these aren't messages that should be sent. People are allowed to organize in their community, people are allowed to connect and build relationships, and people are allowed to say that cutting social spending, creating injustices, all those things are not okay.
actual G20 group, like the politicians, the people that are like leading the world. Do you have any thoughts on what they're up to?
Yeah, I do have some thoughts of what they're up to. I think they are trying to tax people, cut social services, and hide behind their fences because and their riot police because they obviously do have something to hide. Their backhanded deals are making people angry, making people upset, and they're followed by resistance everywhere for very valid reasons because they're bringing injustices to communities, and people aren't going to stand up for it. And people are saying that that's not okay. So I think we need to get rid of the G20, abolish them. It's not a legitimate forum to be talking about global issues.
I myself was a member of the Alternative Media Center during the G20 Summit weekend, and like for example, all day Saturday I was wearing my press badge, and they snatched me, they threw me on the pavement once, they dragged me, they threw me on the pavement again, an officer placed his knee on my head, very painful. You've never had a knee on your head, you should know that it's extremely painful. Then they picked me up, they jostled me around and threw me into the van. And it was an unmarked van, and I should say that the 4 officers who did this never identified themselves as officers. I don't even know to this day if 3 of the 4 of them were officers. I've only identified one of them. It's Officer Kevin Antoine, badge number 7880, Division 52 of the Toronto Police Department. So they threw me into an unmarked van. Officer Kevin Antoine sat on top of me and punched me in the torso. I was kind of starting to voice, stop doing this. And then one of the other officers choked me, strangled me, and held that for a long time, and then punched me in the head. And I just started loudly saying, "I'm a good person. I don't know why you're doing this to me." They drove me into the temporary police station right there on Eastern Avenue, and they arrested me and kept me in jail for 2.5 days.
The long line of defendants.
It's a fiasco and it just needs to end.
Hundreds of G20 court dates at once.
My charge was withdrawn today immediately.
Who went free and who is still facing the law?
You said you were shot. Tell us where you were shot.
Right here.
And that's a police bullet?
This is a rubber bullet. There was another one in my sternum. Thank you.
There are a handful of charged who did not come by bus today. They have been in custody since the G20. Those charged with conspiracy who were arrested before the violent march. For many, it was a quick court appearance. Some coming a long way to have the charges dropped.
I came all the way from Washington, D.C. just to have my case withdrawn because of course they don't have a case.
The head crown explains that many were let go today if they made a charitable donation.
Yes.
But are they accepting responsibility?
No, there is no admission of responsibility with this. It's simply a donation is done, and the person walks away from court.
But that deal was a head shaker to Josh Berman.
If I'm not responsible, why do I have to pay anything?
One of the more high-profile accused was Kelly Flugback. She was labeled a ringleader and had plenty to say while at the G20. Today, after getting out of court, she didn't have too much to say at all.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not really talking to press at the moment. I'd be happy to at a later date.
You know you got a message to say, right? That's why you're here in the first place. So what is the message?
Yeah, I'd be happy to give you those messages at a later date.
But the man responsible for leading the prosecution of the G20 cases doesn't see it that way.
The determination of whether it's in the public interest to proceed with a case is entirely independent and different than the reasonable and probable grounds that the police have to lay it in the first place.
End up, wait in line, and they drop charges. Me and my colleague both have our charges dropped. And yeah, they're just shuffling people through. They seem to be dropping the majority of the charges.
National Post photographer Brett Grunlock and several dozen others arrested during the G20 protest had their charges dropped today. Grunlock was taken down while covering the Queen's Park protest.
Obviously, it was excessive use of force, and it's being shown right now. If they're not getting convictions, then they're proving that they're wrong, right?
Within minutes, several walked out. Their charges dropped.
I'm now a free man. I'm not a property of the state, which is nice.
National Post photographer Brett Grunlock had 2 charges dropped. He spent 2 days in jail after being arrested as he photographed this riot at Queen's Park.
Who looks bad now, right? Like, their job is to get convictions, and they're not getting convictions, so what were they doing that day?
More than 1,000 people were arrested during that weekend. Of the 303 people in court today, 110 came from Quebec.
While some protesters were relieved to have the charges withdrawn through the diversion process, others are refusing to take it.
I feel I do have a duty, since I was arrested unlawfully and detained unlawfully, to not accept an agreement like this, because I'm paying for having that done to me, and that seems wrong.
The cases of the so-called Black Bloc protesters, alleged to be responsible for the burning of police cars and the damage to downtown businesses, alleged ringleaders, and those facing more serious charges were given dates to return to court.
For yet another brush with the law, they came by bus from Montreal.
I was in jail like 63 hours, and the first time I came, my charges dropped. So they make a mistake.
Some faced short-lived prosecutions.
I went in and my charges were withdrawn.
Sorting cases for some 300 people happened outside.
The other hundreds didn't have to be in the same day in the same courthouse.
Lacey McCauley considered it a waste of time.
Basically, they had no case against me because I was very maliciously charged with a charge that was completely false.
She was summoned all the way from Washington. Like her, dozens had their charges dropped, but not the majority.
I'm hoping that all the charges get dropped for everyone, but I think at this rate it's a circus. People are just being run through a factory. This is not justice.
In a record mass arrest for Canada, police detained 1,100 people. About 300 were charged, rounded up in 3 main incidents.
Everybody out of the park!
A rally at the Ontario Legislature, a skirmish outside the detention centre, and a downtown showdown.
People in court today are being charged and prosecuted not because of any actual crimes, but because of their opposition to the G20.
Some of the most serious charges have been leveled against so-called Black Bloc anarchists. But some of these accused facing less serious charges have the option of donating to charity for a clean slate.
They're trying to keep the number of people in the hallways down so they can comply with safety around the fire code.
When I was out there, I saw a lot of people being beaten by police. I saw a lot of people arrested for not doing anything other than protesting peacefully.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. There's a lot of speakers been speaking to that today. They're hoping the Crown's going to withdraw it. I don't think that's going to happen. I spoke with the Crown earlier. They say they are reviewing the cases. There's certainly an expectation that some, maybe the number of 75 is floating around, maybe withdrawn. People also getting disclosure today. And that means no trials here today, Brad, but it will be continuing on. We've seen a lot of folks from all over, including a couple of busloads of people coming in from Quebec. Brad?
Yeah. The hallways inside are literally overflowing with those waiting to appear in one of 3 courtrooms designated for today's hearings. Many of those appearing today were arrested at Queen's Park on June 26th. Those facing lesser charges are being offered peace bonds and ordered to pay a small donation to charity. Mayoral candidate Selwyn Firth said no to the deal.
Basically be accepting guilt for what happened to them. And as a result, they may not be able to eligible for class action lawsuits.
Minutes after her charges were dropped, Natalie Gray showed the injury suffered after being shot with a rubber bullet. She questions if police will ever be held to account.
I would like the 3 officers that assaulted me to be held criminally responsible. The one who shot me without any reason, and the 2 that jumped on me, and I was the most terrified I've ever been in my life.
The exact number of those who had their charges dropped is not yet known. A class action lawsuit is now underway.
Knowledge is power. Understand what's going on for you. The other part, too, is to understand what the perpetrator, and I'm going to use the term perpetrator for the police, okay? The perpetrator had their own psychological tactics. We saw the physical tactics that they were using, the sound cannons, the rubber bullets, you know, their batons, like all of that were the physical tactics. The psychological tactics is the detention, the kettling, isolating people, you know, monopolizing perception. You know, just a lot of different things. In fact, Amnesty International in 1973 published Bitterman's Chart of Coercion, which actually talks about the psychological tactics used by perpetrators.
You can go to the website and see the movie for free. So it's a recession, and not necessarily everybody can buy the DVD, but if they want to see it, it's free for the viewers. We want everybody to see the information.
What are your thoughts on how the movement handled the G20 demonstrations?
Well, there were a number of different issues that came up around tactics. Even on the left, quite frankly, a great deal of the discussion has been around issues of once the confrontation broke out on the Saturday, of some windows getting smashed and this kind of stuff. I think the point, however, is that is really important to us is, first of all, is that if we have a movement that's worth anything, we're going to defend people. We're not going to, out of some craven desire for respectability in the media or fear of disapproval from the state, refuse to fully support all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves under attack, and we better be doing that. But the other question is, I think that the main tactical split that occurred was not between some people wearing black clothing and other people. The split was between the bureaucratic trade union leaders and NGOs, of respectable NGOs, whose perspective in challenging the G20 is to try to put together a respectable voice of appeal to capitalism to be somewhat more humane than it's been than it's been to date, and to organise events that are calculatedly as squeaky clean as they possibly can be, to literally coordinate them, choreograph them with the cops. And there were thousands of people who were not content to accept those boundaries, and they came out on the streets and didn't feel that the police had to tell them that Queen Street was the limits of where they could exercise their freedom of speech and assembly, and hence a confrontation emerged. And when it emerged, it was clear that the whole police operation had been geared to utilising that. That after the initial period of confrontation, the next 2 days were dominated by this incredible dry run for a police state.
What happened there was unprecedented. The most arrests in Canadian history.
It's really interesting. After I got released on the Tuesday, after everything went down, I got my stuff back, my backpack and all my possessions, and they had the warrant sheet that had my picture and had the charges I was facing that they used to arrest me and pick me out of a crowd, and didn't have my real name. It had my MC name, Illogic. So they didn't even know who I was. They just knew me as Illogic. So definitely, that was a big part of why we were arrested, was because of the music, and that's why they were targeting us.
To me, it's become a fascist state. With what happened with the G20, I think it was a dress rehearsal for what's going to happen now. The toys that they got now, all this new equipment that some of them, I guess, they used at the G20. I was at the demonstrations. And I see that, they're going to use them on other demonstrations. And I think it was in July that Harper said he was going to be making more cuts to all the different social programs, and this is kind of coming down the line where they don't care anymore. They're just following orders, I guess, what they say from Chief Blair. But at the same time, that we still definitely have to fight back. We have no other alternative.
It was a demonstration here at Ryerson.
Yes.
For Alex Hundred, man that they've accused a lot of with this G20
the
conspiracy
mastermind
here.
of mayhem, allegedly.
Right. Well, what are your thoughts on this Alex Hundred situation? What are you thinking about this?
The whole thing is pretty scary, in my opinion. Like he was arrested before anything happened on the Saturday. His house was raided by police in the middle of the night with guns drawn. He was then in jail for over a month, I believe, before he got his bail hearing, and then he got bail with very restrictive conditions. And everybody who was arrested during the G20, part of their bail conditions was to be unable to go to any protests. That was part of the conditions. No participation in protests, no organizing protests. So I haven't been to any of the rallies that have taken place, including the one yesterday, because that's against my bail conditions. If I did that, I'd be breaking them. I could go back to jail. So it's pretty messed up. So anyways, what happened with Alex about almost 3 weeks ago now, 3 weeks Friday, he was speaking on a panel at Ryerson University. It was not a protest, it was not a demonstration of any kind. It was inside. He was invited by Judy Rebick to speak, and he spoke at the panel. And when he returned home, he was greeted by 7 police officers and RCMP officers, who then brought him back to jail. And they said he breached his bail and that he's now going back. So obviously they had people following him and watching him, and which is, I mean, that alone is kind of scary. But the fact that they're trying to use that as a reason to put him back in jail, saying that, you know, to speak on a university panel is a demonstration. They're just basically, you know, trying to bend the law as much as they can to make his life very hard.
Thank you for being scared of terrorism for the last 10 years. We promise you the September 11th attacks were exactly as the corporate mainstream media told you. Do not do your own research. Doing your own research is very boring. Let the television and the newspapers do your research for you. We promise you the governments of this world have no reason to lie to you.
Give me the word out, man. Make copies. Get the word out, people. Make some copies. We want to wake everybody up. Thank you to the Real News and everybody that was here. G20 Exposed.ca. You can view the film for free. This is about the Canadian Charter rights and freedoms here. We're getting out the truth, people. That's it. Yeah.
Expressions Against Oppression Week will be ending tomorrow with Night of Expressions.
We'd like to thank everybody that came out today at the event. It's the first Canadian documentary on G20.
With these messages, you can't broadcast any of these things on the mainstream media because your job isn't to educate the people as to what people here at the G20 actually think. It's to portray us as violent, dangerous people burning police cars.
And if you go to Toronto, G20 Exposed.ca, you can go there and you can view the film for free. The information is important. We want the truth to be told because a lot of this footage wasn't on the alternative, it wasn't in the mainstream media. So we have a story of a gentleman, his name's John Prune. He's a 57-year-old Revenue Canada employee. He was there at the G20 peacefully sitting down at Queen's Park, which was the designated area for peaceful protests, and his leg was ripped off him, his amputee prosthetic leg. 5 police officers tackled him to the ground. They labeled his leg a whipping. So when things like that are happening to our fellow Canadians, we got to stand up and we got to speak out because we have freedom of assembly and freedom of speech, and we're going to stand strong because we're Canadians. We're going to stand up for our fellow humans, and we're going to get this information out.
Word of Mouth Wednesday, we're here at Ryerson campus. We just saw the screening of G20 Exposed, the movie, and we got a guest here. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, my name is John Prine from Welland, Ontario.
And what did you think of the movie today?
It was great. I really liked it. It showed me a lot of what happened at G20. I was arrested at the time, and so I missed a lot of what happened on TV, what happened to a lot of the people there. I mean, I heard what people were saying when we were held in detention, but now I got to see what happened, and shocked and amazed at what the police did and what the people went through, the way they were hurt. I guess I'm just shocked, still shocked about the whole thing, and we need a public inquiry to clear the air on this.
We have a gentleman here who was an amputee. Okay, he had one leg, and they ripped it off him and they made him hop into a paddy wagon. This is not what Canada's about. Imagine if this was Terry Fox, you know, somebody who's Canadian. We all have human rights, and we're not going to be brutalized by the police. We're not going to be terrorized. We don't stand for Public Works Act, which is a fraud.
I just want a public inquiry is my big concern about this. Seeing the movie tonight just makes me think that that's the only way to go. And I think anybody who sees this movie will see that we need a public inquiry. It's right there on film. I mean, you can't turn down a public inquiry. It's the only way to sort this out and you know, see what went wrong. A lot of things went wrong. It's right there on film.
What's the difference between these DVDs here?
Yeah, basically what we're looking for is to get the truth out, and we're not looking to profit. We're just looking at our costs. So we're giving out free DVDs at the event. We tell people to make copies, to give it out to your family members and friends. And we have the factory wrap version for $5.
And would you recommend the G20 Exposed movie?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, if you want to see truth behind what happened, not just the TV images brought by the mainstream media. You've got to see this G20 movie. It's fantastic.
And it's the first G20 Exposed documentary in Canada, so we want this to be on everybody's shelf. We want people to realize that there was more to the story than what you were told. And it's important that we stand up for Canada.
Well, one thing about the G20 Exposed, it shows the grassroots movement, the media, which is pivotal because with the mainstream media, you're only seeing one side, and it's important for everybody to see the other side, and which is actually the factual side. So I was really impressed with this movie. It pulled together a lot of resources, your footage, his footage, Dan's, the real news, and that is the true message. And all Canadians need to see this film because it happened on their country. Our Canada was turned into Nazi Germany for the weekend, so if we don't want it to happen again, we've got to be informed and we've got to do something about it. And that's just, it's got to be cool now to tell the truth. I think that's what we need to do is, it's got to be cool now to tell the truth. If not, there goes our future.
And now this Public Works Protection Act, which they chose to pull out of the books and enforce on us, which as I believe was originally introduced here to protect Parliament and government buildings from Russian and German spies. So that doesn't say very much for the way that these people think about the people who live in their city, the people who contribute to their city, the people who run their city, the people who created this city, the people who are this city. Doesn't say very much about the way that they look at us. So
you guys recommend G20 Exposed?
I think it's a great movie, great documentary. Everybody should see it, and they should share it with their family members. If you know anyone in law enforcement, share the video with them as well. We need those people. They're the most vital piece to the puzzle. We need them on our side. We need them to wake up, and we need them to stop taking unlawful orders. So
2 thumbs up. I think you definitely need to share this. Again, the only way to stop something, corrupt behavior, is for the citizenry to be informed about that. So you got to spread the message, spread the truth, and the truth is contagious. And so if people do see it, they'll start to act and do something about it. Share the truth with their inner circle. And that's what we got to do.
So we just had our screening. The premiere was at Ryerson University. And we had about 200 people come out, and everybody was supporting us, and we gave away about 400 free DVDs.
Saturday afternoon, it continued throughout the weekend, and we were gathering a lot of information and monitoring the activities of that crowd, and we were doing everything we could throughout the course of the entire weekend to prevent a repeat
of
what we had seen on Saturday afternoon.
I want to read a quote here from Joe Warmington, who thinks of himself as a friend of the cops and has written some good stuff about the police over the years. He's a Toronto Sun columnist. He says, "A police source tells me the only thing that stopped the officers from stopping the black bloc tactics was an order telling them not to. They tell me they could have rounded up all or most of them in no time. But even before that decision was made, says one insider, there was mass confusion and indecision. Quote, the orders went from engage to no, don't engage, to engage to no, don't engage, said an officer. Eventually there was a, quote, a clear order from the command center saying do not engage. And at that point, smelling weakness and no repercussions, the downtown was effectively turned over to the vandals, while police, up to 19,000 strong, were ordered to stay out of it." Okay, that's what he got from some cops on the force. What do you say?
He's wrong. That did not happen. And in fact, there was in our incident command center a lot of people moving as quickly as possible to ensure that we were able to respond and contain that threat in a safe way. There's always anonymous people who think in hindsight, and the clarity of their hindsight is remarkable. But in hindsight, we would have done things differently. They would have saved the day. But the reality is, there was a lot of people to respond to that situation.
But there wasn't a go, don't go.
There was no go, don't go. The people that are on the ground were not restricted from making tactical deployments and responses to what they were seeing.
All right, so that is the chief of the Toronto Police, Bill Blair. That is his thoughts there on this article that came out in the Toronto Sun of anonymous officers that were saying that they received an order to stand down. That is why you can watch the G20 Exposed documentary and see this riot group trashing the city for, well, it seems, how long do you think it was? How long, Adam? How long do you think? What's your estimate?
Witnesses have said it was about an hour and a half, and it took place over about 24 blocks. The Black Bloc riot initially started on the Saturday afternoon. The peaceful protest had sort of gone through maybe with 25,000 people. And then at that point, a group of Black Bloc people broke off around Queen and Spadina, and they attacked a police car actually with a policeman inside it. So even right there, everyone should have been aware that, hey, these guys are committing vandalism, they're dangerous, they have weapons. They had sticks and hammers and things of that nature. So after that happened, you can see in the video that there were police sort of outside the Much Music building, all sort of along Queen Street at the intersection of Queen and University. And as the Black Bloc riot headed east down Queen Street, you see all the police standing down and pulling back and basically clearing the riot route for them. So they went east on Queen, and then they turned south down Bay Street to King, right in the financial district. That's where they set 2 cars on fire in that intersection. Then they went over to Yonge Street, and then they went all the way from Yonge and King all the way up to Yonge and College, smashing windows the whole way. And during the whole time on Yonge Street, you could see maybe a few cops, but they were just standing back, letting it happen. There were a few cops at the intersection of King and Bay, but again, they were all standing back. And then once they got to Yonge and College, then they went basically back to Queen's Park. They got rid of their black disguises and sort of blended in with everyone. And then that gave the police the pretext to go in and sort of round up basically everyone at Queen's Park. They sort of surrounded the whole place. They arrested seemingly random people who, most of whom did not have anything to do with this riot, probably didn't even know that this was even occurring.
Oh yeah, we've interviewed a few of them. We've interviewed a man with an amputee leg with one leg. We've interviewed a TTC driver walking to work. We've interviewed a candidate for mayor arrested near U of T. All of this happening, people that weren't even dressed in black, not even with this riot. That's why it seems almost symbolic how the whole thing ended in the free speech zone, this area of Queen's Park. But just to get you another fact here from recent testimony here. Here is how the RCMP commander, Alphonse McNeil, responds to the question about agent provocateurs being used in the G20. Here's a quick clip here.
Des policiers en civil qui vont dans la foule. Vous utilisez ça, vous, à la GRC?
No, we don't. Not for the purpose that the expression that you're using is used for. We have people in civilian garb who blend in with the crowd to advise us of the movement of the crowd and what tactics they may be using, but not to provoke or incite or anything of that nature.
So he is saying that there were officers within the crowd. I guess he's saying RCMP officers. Well, if he's the commander of the RCMP, but I guess he was commanding the whole operation. He did say that there were officers in the crowd advising them, providing intelligence, I guess, of what's going on. With this whole G20 Exposed documentary, and I know you guys get this, you probably get this a lot. Like, what are your thoughts on this issue of agent provocateurs? With all your research, what are you guys thinking?
Well, we have some footage in the documentary which pertains to the SPP summit in Quebec, in Montebello. And it was on record, the CBC came out and they said that police were dressed up as anarchists, inciting violence, and that was proven. The police actually came out and had to admit that. So if we know that in past summits that has occurred, then it's open for investigation. That's pretty much what we're saying. We don't try to place blame. We don't try to suggest that in the video. We just prove the facts. So we want everybody to see the video for free. We want people in Canada to be aware, to be educated to the facts. Because we see this G20 summit go down in history, unprecedented. $1.3 billion of our money was spent. Fences were dividing the elites, with these 5-star hotels and the best chefs in the world, and we're suffering on the other end of it. We get beat down. We get illegally searched and detained. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was violated. So we got to stand up as Canadians. We got to be aware of what's happening. So we want everybody to see it for free. They can go to www.Toronto G20Exposed.ca.
And you guys keep it up. Derek, Adams, good to hear from you guys again. Your film is doing well. It's waking up a lot of people to the issues that happened here in the G20. So great job, you guys too.
Awesome, thanks, Dan. You know what? It wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for Dan and Press for Truth, because we commend the independent media for bringing out these facts to the Canadian public.
Well, we're all in this together, right?
Exactly.
I mean, we got to get the word out there to the people, and that's the bottom line. That's what it's all about.
Truth inquiry, because public inquiry doesn't seem like it's going to happen. Politicians believe the cops did everything fine. There was no problems here, but we've got a different take on things. And Toronto Truth Seekers, we're out here. We got DVDs. Check us out Saturdays, Yonge Dundas Square, G20. There is no exit.
It's become a fascist state. I mean, with what happened at G20, I think it was a dress rehearsal for what's going to happen now.
Enlightened sovereignty, then, the natural extension of enlightened self-interest.
I know some people don't like it. It's a loss of national sovereignty, but it is a simple reality. It is a simple reality.
There is no exit. Communicate this fucking exit. We're just marching.
The problems we have with current account imbalances and the currency controversies. Look, I think it's fair to say we did not resolve those issues here.
There actually is no exit. There actually is no exit. They want us to move, but there is no exit.